What's up guys, it's Gone, and today we'll be doing my complete positional rundown for fantasy baseball in 2022. While I talked about some sleepers and prospects in my previous fantasy videos, this one's going to be a bit different as we're going to be using broader terms to discuss the overall plan for how to draft in every position in fantasy baseball. The breakdown for how this is going to work is we first discuss possible strategies going in at the position, then discuss how we are going to play that out and some potential players to target. When I show players I might draft, I'm not going to go into a complete breakdown of their skill set as I would in my previous sleeper videos, but rather just give a brief overview. Furthermore, we can also discuss some breakout prospects that you may see in at each position. Before we get on to the video, could you guys please hit the like and subscribe button? Currently, only 3% of people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if y'all do, not only would it help me grow my channel, but it also encourages me to create more videos like this for you guys. And without further ado, let's get on to the video. Starting off at the catching position, and this year is awfully different from the previous seasons in that there aren't many catchers that really stand out as eons better than all of the rest, like in previous years when JT Realmuto would be the clear-cut favorite, followed by all of the rest. The first catcher off the board this year is Salvador Perez because of his massive home run power, and then JT Realmuto because of his consistency. There are two ways to cut it right now at catcher. The first way is to draft an elite catcher, as it doesn't really cost you that much, as it will only take about a 6th round pick to get one along the likes of Salvador Perez, JT Realmuto, and Will Smith. The other route is to take some high upside catchers with a higher risk of lack of production and playing time. My ideal strategy here would be to do something in the middle. Ideally, I would like to draft a player like Keibert Ruiz or Dalton Varsho and some young catchers on pretty bad teams that have little chance of losing playing time and have the upside to be a top 5 catcher in the game. However, catching is different in that playing time is really just as important as production. Teams often want to go for the best overall catcher, which sometimes does not align with who may be the best fantasy catcher. That's where Dalton Varsho comes in. Not only is he listed as a catcher, but he's also listed as an outfielder, which not only means that you can start him at outfielder, but also means that he's playing in the outfield when you can play him at catcher. Catching is the most strenuous position on the field, and it does work players over the course of a 162-game season. Dalton playing in the outfield means that he gets more playing time and less wear and tear on his body. So, in short, draft Dalton Varsho, but I would also like to draft another catcher so I can feel free to move Dalton to the outfield when necessary. Some high upside catchers to target as a backup to Dalton Varsho would be players like Sean Murphy or Francisco Mejia. Next up is the first base position, and this is where you want the majority of your power to come from in the top 6 first basemen, who are all some of the most premier power hitters in the game, in Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Freddie Freeman, Matt Olson, Paul Goldschmidt, Peter Alonso, and Max Muncy. The last of those I would really target in Max Muncy, who is really just the definition of consistency, in that he has hit 35 home runs in each of his past 3 full seasons, and in 2019 and 21, he was an all-star and finished up to 15th in MVP voting. He's easily one of the best first basemen in the game and is worth drafting with a 5th round pick. But what I also like about him is his second base eligibility, so he can be moved around in the infield. I especially like players that can play multiple positions in the infield, so he can be moved to second base when necessary. Other players that are worth drafting that can play first base in the later rounds are guys like Jake Cronenworth, Ty France, and Ryan Mountcastle. I specifically like Ryan Mountcastle because I feel that he can prove himself as one of these stars on a bad Baltimore Orioles team. And in 2020, he had a great season, hitting .333 with 5 home runs and 140 at-bats. Although in 2021, he came down to earth a bit, hitting .255, but he still hit 33 home runs across 586 at-bats. As a first baseman, he can also play outfielder, so whenever the Orioles have a game, he should be able to be in your starting lineup and is only worth an 11th round pick. In short, I like first basemen who can play other positions, so preferably draft 2 first basemen that can be switched around when necessary. The second base position is next, and the first thing that you'll realize when you look at the second base position is that there are a wide variety of players who also have a secondary position. For example, the number 1 player in Trey Turner is also listed as a shortstop, and while he's mainly known for his power-speed combo, you also have a guy like Jonathan India, who is also listed as a second baseman, who is mainly known for his bat. I talked about this in my sleepers video, but I really like Ketel Marte down at the 7th round because of his positional flexibility in the outfield. However, I could also go with a guy like DJ LeMahieu, who also has positional flexibility. Another way that you could play this position is to skip out on it entirely and only draft second baseman in the mid to later rounds. I would recommend avoiding the mid-tier second baseman like Calvin Biggio or Marcus Semien, and that their production rivals that of production seen later in the draft. One player I would like to highlight here is Ryan McMahon, and that he's mainly a third baseman, but is listed as a second baseman, and you could probably play him there at second base, even though he's really a third baseman, and they are better hitters on average. In the draft position, you can find him in the 10th round, and you should get this guy on your starting second baseman and project him to be a high-end second base producer as an all-around solid player, hitting 23 home runs and 86 RBI with 6 stolen bases and a 528 at-bats in 22-101, and the Rockies just signed him to a pretty big extension, so you can assume that they believe in him and that he should mimic that production this year. So, overall solid production that you can get with just an 11th round pick in Ryan McMahon and play him at second base. Now, for third baseman, you want to draft a player who can just rake here. I don't really think that you need to prioritize any certain type of players that can play a second position here, as most of these players are great third basemen by heart. But the third base position is very deep, and although the first 5 names in Jose Ramirez, Rafael Devers, Manny Machado, Austin Riley, and Chris Bryant might be tempting, you can get just as good of production in the lower rounds elsewhere. I would like to target guys in the later rounds like Eugenio Suarez, Ke'Bryan Hayes, Luis Urias, and Eduardo Escobar with later picks, as I feel like you get a small drop in production for a large drop in average draft position. There's no need to go for stolen bases with the third base position, as many of these guys are on the larger side and are instead good hitters. Although I do not recommend taking any of the elite third basemen. If you had to, I would target Chris Bryant, who you can take in the 4th round, and that is merely because of his upside at Coors Field and the fact that you can move him into the outfield as well, which provides a little bit of value as positional flexibility. In conclusion, third base is a very deep position, so do not feel pressure to take a high-end third baseman in the early rounds that can only play third base. If you want a high-end third baseman, get someone with positional flexibility like Chris Bryant or DJ LeMahieu. Next up is the last of the infield positions in shortstop, and unlike third base or first base, it is not a very deep position at all, so you want to spend one of your first 4 picks on a shortstop for one of those S or A tier shortstops, like Trey Turner, Bo Bichette, Xander Bogaerts, Marcus Semien, Tim Anderson, Trevor Story, or Wander Franco. I really don't want to deal with the lower tier shortstops because they all have issues with their floor or upside. However, if you want to draft a secondary shortstop, I would prefer to draft one who plays another position, as you've already spent a top 4 pick on a player who will mainly play shortstop, so you want to meet the get end on another position. I do like players such as Chris Taylor or Brendan Rodgers with a later round pick who mainly play a different position like outfielder or second base, so even though they count as a shortstop, you can play them at a different position. One intriguing option here, though, is Fernando Tatis Jr., who can be drafted with an 8th or 9th round pick, depending on your league. And with Fernando, obviously, he's going to be out for the first month or 2, but when he comes back, and hopefully within sooner rather than later, and he stays healthy, then he can be a steal in the 9th round. Obviously, it's your choice if you want to draft Tatis. Personally, I'm going to if he falls to the 9th round, because hopefully he will be healthy come playoff time, and that's all that really matters. Next up is the outfield position, and what you'll notice is that all outfield positions are combined into one broad category in most leagues as outfielders. You will not see specifically center fielder, left fielder, and right fielder, so what you end up getting is a wide variety of players, including speed demons and power outfielders in the same position. With this wide variety of different players all playing one position, I recommend getting players who have a niche in fantasy, like Juan Soto or Starling Marte, and that they dominate one certain category like on-base percentage and stolen base. Personally, I'd recommend spending 2 of your first 5 picks on outfielders or at least 1 pick in the first 3. Especially if you draft a pitcher in the first round, then you want to draft at least a shortstop or outfielder in the second round. You want 2 of your outfield positions to be held by a quality everyday big leaguer drafted within your first 6 or 7 picks. Some sleepers in the outfield position include players who can be moved to other positions, like Chris Taylor and Tommy Edman. However, you will also have to draft those players somewhat high. Prioritize spending the last round of your draft to pick up some lower floor outfielders with higher ceilings like Jared Kelenic, Adolis Garcia, and Miles Straw. Hopefully, at the end of the day, you hope that they emerge into starting caliber outfielders, but at the end of the day, you could also drop them and pick up whoever's hottest on your waiver wire right now. Last up, we have the utility position, and here you can play really any position, so I recommend drafting where you think is deepest. Personally, for me, that is the first base and third base position. If you can get guys in the later rounds like Jake Cronenworth, Ty France, and Ryan Mountcastle, you could probably play them at utility and move them around into starting positions that are not utility when necessary. Now we move on to the pitching part of this fantasy breakdown, and starting with starting pitcher. We prioritize getting at least 2 quality starting pitchers who we know are going to produce a healthy under 3.8 ERA and also provide high strikeout numbers. I recommend drafting 2 starting pitchers in the first 5 picks or 1 in your first 3 picks. However, I do not recommend drafting starting pitchers within the middle rounds, as you can get players who will provide just as much value in the later rounds or a little bit less for a high drop in ADP. For example, let's say you draft Shane Bieber and Sandy Alcantara with the first couple of rounds. Now, you can afford to hold off on the starting pitcher position until about the 9th or 10th round. Don't let those B-tier starting pitchers, such as Lance Lynn, Luis Castillo, or Max Fried on your roster. For me, they really don't provide enough bang for your buck, considering how high you are drafting them, and I prefer drafting a high-end third baseman or first baseman in those middle rounds. So, you can end up drafting some high upside picks in the later rounds like Zach Gallen, Shane Baz, or Luis Garcia. Usually younger pitchers who are on a mediocre to good team can give you wins, strikeouts, and lower your ERA and WHIP categories. I made a sleepers position for pitchers, so after you watch this video, you can watch those and draft elite pitchers. You can watch that video where you can check out the sleepers that you should draft in the later rounds. The last position that we are going to talk about is the relief pitchers, and for here, really, it depends on if your league is saves or saves plus holds in the category. If your league has saves plus holds, you can really just hold off on relief pitchers until the very end, as some of the best relief pitchers who are not a closer in such as Devin Garcia and Jake McGee are not predicted to be drafted in any rounds. However, with a hold being just as valuable as a save, you're basically just drafting an elite closer with only one of your last picks. Some other valuable relief pitchers who mainly just get holds are Camilo Doval and Jordan Hicks. However, if your league does only include saves, then you still don't really have to draft anybody that high, as there are some closers on bad teams such as Mark Melancon or David Bednar, who will get you some spot saves here and there. But otherwise, saves are just really one category. It's not worth spending a mid to top pick on a relief pitcher just so you can win that one category. In conclusion, draft unique players who fill out different ranks on your team, and while drafting, look what's missing on your team specifically and then target that. You want to avoid drafting first basemen, catchers, and third basemen in the early rounds of the draft, not because they're not good, but because you can find depth elsewhere. Prioritize drafting elite starting pitchers in the early rounds, especially those who can get you high strikeout numbers while still keeping their ERAs relatively low. Furthermore, draft elite starting shortstops sooner rather than later, as the risk factor goes up considerably after the first few shortstops go off the board. Furthermore, target positional flexibility within your outfield and the middle of the infield. Lastly, target a few outfielders that can be mainstays in your lineup, and bonus points if they can play another position. I hope that this guide helped. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, if you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe, and comment down below new video ideas. I see that you got this far, so that means that you enjoy my videos, and if you haven't hit the subscribe button, then you can do that right now. After this, I think I'm just going to stray away from fantasy baseball, at least until the start of the regular season. Instead, focus on some season preparedness, such as a predictions video for what's going to happen in the playoffs or who's going to win the different awards that come out every year. And without further ado, thank you guys for watching, and check out some of my other videos.